Hi guys, Ewell here with a quick overview on my entry into the GMTK Game Jam. For those that don't know, a Game Jam is an event where a theme is released and lots of people make a game about that theme in a given time period. For the GMTK Game Jam, the theme was out of control, and we had 48 hours to make a game based on that theme. I had a lot of fun in my first ever Game Jam, and the 2020 GMTK Game Jam was the biggest Game Jam ever hosted on itch.io, with 18,000 people joining and over 5,000 games submitted. The game that I made was called Explosive Gun. It is a 2D platformer where your goal is to rescue all of your caged friends and kill the enemies trying to stop you. The problem is that your gun is broken and shoots at random intervals with a large amount of knockback. It's out of control. This means that you have to constantly aim it away from your friends and in the opposite direction to where you want to go. My development process started when they released the theme at 8 PM on Friday. I was watching TV with my family, but I began to think of ideas, and I went to bed trying to work out which ideas I could do and would be the most fun. My first idea was an out-of-control car that you had to protect by creating a path for it to follow or try and drive it, but I didn't choose it because I didn't think that I could make it very fun. I then thought of using a gun that shoots randomly, and I ended up choosing that idea. I thought that the gun could shoot really powerful shots that could blow up everything, but I'm not good at physics in Godot, and so I couldn't make it work very well. Finally, I had some ideas about your controller moving even when you don't press anything, like you have controller drift, or an enemy that is overpowered and destroys everything. However, I chose against those ideas. After I had chosen my idea, I wrote down the basics of what I wanted to be in the game, and with that done, I began work on my game at 11 AM on Saturday, 15 hours into the Game Jam. First, I made a simple tile map with collisions and a character that could walk and jump. Then I made a gun that followed the mouse. I had never done this before, and after some trial and error, I eventually ended up adding the local mouse position .angle to the gun's rotation and flipping the gun sprite vertically when it faces left. Then I added a bullet position to the gun and made a rigid body bullet that would be instanced there. I coded in an impulse that would be applied to the bullet when the player shoots, and I had a working gun. Next, I worked on the enemies and made these weird mole/goomba creatures with a cannon on their head. I used raycasts and a timer to make them walk back and forth along the floor. Then I used a raycast to check if the enemy can see the player. If it can, it will stop and aim at the player, and a raycast to see if the player is within a range and can shoot at them. Getting this all to work took a long time, but once I had enemies working, I made it so that if the player or enemy is hit by the other's bullet, they would die, and I had a working game. After that, I added in the random nature of the gun, and when you could and couldn't manually fire it. I also added in knockback, which I hadn't done before, but wasn't hard as I just needed to minus the bullet position from the gun position, normalize it, and times it by a constant of how much knockback I wanted. With that done, I added portals and called it a day. I only worked for around 4 or 5 hours that day, so I had a lot of work to do on the next day. On Sunday, I began work at around 10:30 AM and started on the caged friends. I created global variables to find out whether you had saved or killed your friends and made the bare minimum to have them completed. I made spikes and began work on the UI of the player. I added hearts to represent the player's health and a coin counter to show their score. I added a sanity score that would decrease if they killed their friends, and you would die if you reached 0 sanity. Finally, I added a little icon to show whether you could shoot or not. By now, it was around 4 PM and I was starting to realize that I was running out of time. I tried to make a parallax background, but it wasn't working, and with limited time I gave up and stuck in my very bright and colourful background, possibly too colourful. Then I worked on making my game feel better by adjusting controls and values, adding death animations and the flying animation for rescuing friends. I also added a start page, an end screen, and stats page in between levels, but as I was running out of time, they were all very simple and bleak. With around 2 hours to go, I began making the levels and making sure that all of the code worked properly. I made 4 levels and play tested them to make sure that they were the right difficulty. With around an hour to go, I tried to incorporate a 5th level, where all the friends that you had killed and all the enemies that you hadn't killed would come back in a final fight. I had programmed most of it in, but I had trouble spawning in the enemies, and with half an hour left, I scrapped it and finished up what I had working. I didn't have time to add music or sound effects and began to export my project. The only problem was that I had only exported one game before and it had taken ages to get right and to get working. With 10 minutes to go, I exported it and uploaded it to itch.io. When I looked at my page, it wasn't there, and I was so worried and confused as to where it was. Luckily, I had only made it as a draft, and I was able to find it and publish it and add it onto the Game Jam, with 3 minutes and 24 seconds to go. Phew. Anyway, I had a great time making it and playing other people's games. You can play Explosive Gun at ewell.itch.io, and I might be making some more quick games in game jams soon. That's all I have for now. So thanks for watching, like if you liked, and subscribe for more content. See you in the next video. Bye.